Welcome to the 2020 Women's History Tea. I'm Rose Warnicki, president of the Propylaeum. For over the past 130 years, the Propylaeum has provided the place for women to gather and connect through cultural programming. During 2020, our focus has been on commemorating the centennial of women's suffrage, not only the events that led up to the passage of the 19th Amendment, but also the ongoing implications of the women's movement. Today, author and storyteller Kassie Ritman will illustrate the fact that while some suffragists were out marching, others worked behind the scenes in support of the suffrage movement. Sit back and enjoy Kassie's presentation of the politics of the tea room.
Hello, I'm so glad that you came into the prop today. I had an idea. It's November 22nd and it's been a few months. It's been 5 months since our dear May Wright Sewell passed. She was so close to getting to vote. I voted for the first time almost 3 weeks ago and it was exhilarating. Some people tell us, oh, women will just throw that aside and lose interest, and after they've done it once, they don't care. I don't think that's the case. I think we'll keep voting. There were only 18.5 million voters in the 1916 election. In 1920, there were 26.8 million. That's the difference women made. And our party affiliations didn't matter. Some were Republicans for Harding. Some were Cox Democrats. And I know many women who voted for socialist Eugene Debs, though he's currently incarcerated. But I had this idea that maybe it would be nice to make a memory box and keep all of my suffrage things in it, kind of a capsule of time. So today I'm going to pack those away, and I'd kind of like to tell you the story of some of these things. This is our sash that I got from my dear friend Cindy. Cindy made these all for us here at the Propylaeum. Oh, the day we stood on the stairs. Oh, it was so beautiful. We all came down in our dress whites. Probably what kicked off my enthusiasm was the Chicago Columbian World's Fair Exposition in 1893. I know it was a few years ago, but it was amazing. There had been women's pavilions before. In 1876, there was one in Philadelphia. Then in 1884, with the Cotton Exposition in New Orleans, there was also a women's pavilion, but they were just kind of a little show place, maybe to have tea. Chicago was a fully different thing. One of the patriarchs of government there and business was married to a woman who was very, very progressive, and she made sure that we got to have our own pavilion. And as a newspaper man of the time said, what Chicago did for women was women discovered women. Who knew that women could be architects and design a huge building? It was so glorious. Do the sculptures on the outside. Make this incredibly grand thing where you walk in and it was several stories high, and there was a huge mural painted by Mary Cassatt herself. It was said to be over 50 feet wide and 14 feet tall, of women through the ages. And looking over your shoulders as you entered, there were cave women painted on the other wall, and up to the modern times. It was amazing. There was a hall for nursing, showing how we had played a role as medical field care in the Great World War. There were areas of home economics and sanitation. There were tons of rooms about women in the arts. So everything on display was made and done by women. Everything was planned by women. So we had 2 women from each state and Washington, D.C., who were part of the planning and the execution of this. And they were so well organized that they also had a backup 2 women from each state and Washington, D.C. So no matter what had happened, if somebody did fall to polio or did fall to influenza, we still had women who could take their place and get this done for us. The day that I got my invitation to go to the opening in the mail was amazing. And I'm afraid to say that my guidebook to the handicrafts of that building is pretty well worn. I've gone through it so many times and enjoyed it so much. My program from there, oh, and then that's where I bought my copy of The Sturdy Oak, a wonderful novel. And sometimes I wear my oak pen that talks about how men are staunch oaks and women are weak little saplings. But through the story of this, we see that we can change our men and change the way they feel about us in society. So sometimes maybe I'll leave this out and still wear this just as a reminder to myself. We had to wear white because so many people in the press and so many who are anti-suffragists were making us look like cruel, terrible people. So we started choosing to wear lighter clothing year-round, even in winter, which was kind of silly, but it made us look lighter and brighter and happier. We also had yellow as our founding color. Yellow was important because the sunflower blooms so large and is gorgeous, and it made us stand out as well. So I grabbed a few things. One being, this is my original, these are the blossoms from my original pendant that I wore on my shoulder and the first time I marched. And the flowers are the lovely purple, white, and gold of the suffrage movement. There's a difference here between suffragists and suffragettes. We here in Indiana, for the most part, were suffragists. We were not suffragettes. We were not the militants like the girls who you see in London who were throwing firebombs through windows and doing terrible things like that. Although we did have the National Night of Terror in front of President Wilson's White House. That happened, and about 30 women were harmed and taken off to a prison and force-fed for a while. The funny thing is we were actually accused of giving President Woodrow Wilson his stroke that took him out of the 1920 election. But the suffragists prefer to do things in a more civilized manner. We protest nicely, we do marches, we do occasionally raise our voice, but just so that those who are looking on can see and hear us. And what we found happened was we won the vote. Now, some of our sisters were very anti the vote. They were in the anti-suffrage leagues, and we did lose a few members. Some went to the anti-suffrage leagues, and some simply dropped out because they didn't like the political climate of things that were going on at the prop at the time, particularly in our tea room, where we would speak freely about how we felt politically. And some of our friends parted ways as well. Frederick Douglass, who was always a suffragist, anti-slavery, and a temperate man, said to us at one point, "Now is the Negro's time. It is not the time of any women, and women should step back from the cause." However, we marched forward and we got the vote, and we will help our sisters and brothers who don't have the vote yet. We won't lose our enthusiasm. Also, we lost a little bit of credibility when May's book, May Wright Sewell's book came out. Our dear friend, Mr. Booth Tarkington, agreed to help her publish it. She was a leader nationally as well as here on the state and local level in women's suffrage. What Booth didn't know, and most of us who knew her well didn't know, was that May was kind of a closet spiritualist, and that caused a bit of a ruckus. Some of us, though, didn't mind very much, and we enjoyed her book. I have it. I've read it many times. I kind of dabbled in maybe some tarot cards and went to see Nellie Meyer at Tuckaway. This is my handprint. I had her read me. I'll be putting that in my box of memories. My husband is not quite so excited about that. But her book, May's book, is well written, and I think it speaks to how we can speak to the other realm. It's a shame that she got a little bit defamed after a while. In the tea rooms, we had to be kind of careful. We gathered there often and spoke freely for the most part. Now, some tea rooms, say we were going to a meeting or we were out motoring and wanted to stop, we could go to a tea room, and many of them had it spelled tea with just a capital T, and that just meant a temperance room. And you would see men in there. But the true tea rooms were mostly reserved for women. And women could go in there, and if you were very sly, you would look at the flowers that were out front first and decide which way they slanted. If they had planted particularly red roses, then you knew that they were the anti-suffrage league. I personally tore a red rose corsage off of my cousin Elise's lapel one day because I just don't know what holds up the two sides of her ears from collapsing in. She has no idea what she's talking about. However, if the flowers planted out front were all yellow, you knew that that was a suffrage-friendly place. If it was a mixed garden, which was not unusual because many women used their own home for a tea room, and that was a good way to make money. Many of the women even went from Indianapolis up to Wawasee over the summer. The spinsters who worked as school marms, etc., they would follow the people to the Wawasee or the Lakes regions and set up a tea room there, kind of a mobile station. And we could talk freely there as well. You could go in and sort of scan the seating area and ask to be seated by the table that had the pink teapot. The pink teapot was a symbol for suffragists, that they knew if they sat in this area or if they were in this building, that they could speak freely about their cause. This was important later on in the cause because there were so many things going on that were very difficult. It made it very difficult for us to meet together in large groups. There was the influence of pandemic, which had much of the city of Indianapolis shut down, and areas were very squeamish about that because it was rather deadly, and we were required to wear masks, and some liked that, some didn't. So we were in some places outlawed from having large gatherings. So we would go around to the back of these tea rooms and go in, and you could park maybe over in the woods so no one would see you. And we could still talk about our agenda, the important things. Also, there were some husbands and frankly some of our friends who were very anti-suffrage. Now, the funny thing about this is, I find it funny, ironic, not funny, haha, but funny, ironic, these same people who were so against women getting the vote are now encouraging women to vote to repeal suffrage. Once 100 years has passed and someone opens my memory box, I hope all of these sorrows are behind us. The racial disparities, education, the treatment of women, the Magdalene laundries they're sent to, the education of our new Americans, equal housing pay, and these sicknesses. Lord, help us all win over these plagues and never see them again. And most of all, it's my sincerest hope that my granddaughters and my great-granddaughters will still know that they can vote and will take this seriously. I hope that they will walk in our footsteps and not have the disruptions that we've had.
Thank you for joining us. For more information about the Propylaeum, our programs and events, and our historic home, please visit our website at www.thepropylaeum.org. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.